I'm joined by Harry Litman of the Talking Feds YouTube channel, the Talking Feds podcast. Harry, an illustrious career as a federal prosecutor. I've reduced you to Harry Litman of the Talking Feds YouTube channel. But as a former top DOJ official, you've got great insight into all of these issues and on Supreme Court procedure as well. And so, one of the things that I'm really interested in is, I had expected, and I think many legal observers have expected, but I think the lesson is don't expect that much of this United States Supreme Court, is that we'd get some rulings this week on the Trump cases, whether that's on the 14th Amendment Section 3 case where they haven't ruled. But to me, kind of more quickly, I thought we'd get one on the issue of absolute presidential immunity, about whether or not they were going to grant Donald Trump's request for a stay pending certiorari. It's usually a kind of a one sentence minute order from my understanding. They go in, they usually meet on Fridays, they vote on it. You usually get one sentence, yes, stay, no stay, a briefing schedule, but not really significant opinions. I suppose unless there is an opinion where there's maybe some dissents or people who feel strongly one way or the other. So, what's going on? The Supreme Court got this briefing on Trump trying to stay the proceedings pending certiorari to argue absolute presidential immunity. And we haven't heard from the Supreme Court since then. I don't know. What do you make of this?
Okay, well, first, if I can toot my own horn, I also was a Supreme Court clerk for two different justices. So my sort of take here has very much to do with the way I think they operate, and I've seen them operate in an emergency setting, which this is. He files an emergency motion to remove the stay. I mean, to keep the stay in place. And here's my take. You're right that they often will do things, decide whether to take cases on a Friday conference. And they did get all the briefs in front of them by last Thursday, and they could have done it then. And if they had decided it then, we would have learned about it either, even plausibly Friday afternoons. They sometimes can do that, or the following, in this case, Tuesday, because Monday was a holiday. But if they didn't do that, Ben, my take is they've probably done it the way they do other emergency motions, for example, in death penalty cases. That's by the papers and circulating to each of the 9 chambers, justices. Each of the 9 then votes and sends around memos. I don't see why they would have just said last Friday, let's hold this and do nothing on it. There's, it's time sensitive and they know it, until the next conference, which just took place today, a few hours ago. I think it's likely they already took action. And okay, so then why haven't we heard? Because that usually just takes a couple days. The most plausible, and now, yes, I've after tooting my own horn. I can just say, actually, when the justice I clerked for, Justice Marshall, used to say, he who doesn't toot his own horn will find his horn untooted. I just recall that he used to say it. Anyway, having said that, I'm now really dealing in sort of fine points and, little things that you could go with me or not. But I'll tell you how I feel about this. I think they probably decided in that way, and by like Monday or Tuesday. So what's going on? Most likely somebody is writing an opinion. And why is somebody writing an opinion? Not as a concurrence. You don't have the concurring opinions in the disposition of emergency motion, probably because they disagree. Okay, what would they disagree? The first real possibility, I think the strongest, is the court has said no stay. We vote against you. It's possible, of course, the court has said stay, and then people probably on the left would write a separate opinion, but that strikes me as less likely, because if the court is doing Trump's bidding and maybe taking his petition as a petition for cert and putting it over for a very quick hearing on the merits, to me, that's not the sort of thing. It's not collegial, and that you would dissent over. On the other hand, if they're saying no stay, that is the sort of thing that a couple of the obstreperous, I think you could say, justices on the right, Alito and Thomas, might be writing a dissent over. And at that point, that would be holding things up. Now, not indefinitely. There's a point where the Chief Justice could say, Sam, Clarence, please give it to us, or we can release the opinion and your dissents can follow. So all this is by way of saying that, to me, the time, a whole 8 days having elapsed since the papers came, pointed in the direction of some opinion. Now, at that point, all of this, if you put it together, we're talking like 16 to 15 or whatever. Please don't think that certainly shows. But I think when you really analyze and you've been there and think, of the different personalities, it nudges it in the direction of they're having decided not to grant a stay and somebody's writing a dissent. Could be other kinds of things that are writing. Could still be that they construed the stay as a petition for cert and are granting it. But that, to me, is somewhat more congruent with the passage of these last few days.
Yeah, when I gave the introduction there, I shouldn't have only have said a top DOJ official. I mean, the fact that you clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices, I mean, clerking for 1 Supreme Court justice, just so all of our viewers know, and I'm going to toot your horn here, that's like the holy grail of law students to clerk
clerking for 2. That's masochism.
Right. To clerk for a Supreme Court justice. The fact that you clerked for 2 is, I probably think I could count on my hands maybe the amount of people who have clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. But amazing. But you have the understanding of the kind of that rarefied world of how the process works. A lot of people don't know. So, like, do they meet in a room? Right. Do they go duck duck goose? Do they raise their hands? I mean, just because you were in those rooms, just paint the picture of, like, do they meet in a conference room? Share what you can share. They meet in a room, and then what do the clerks do around them to help? What is that process like? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about a little more. They normally meet in a room when they decide on whether to take cases, whether to grant a stay. They meet once or twice a week, and it's this sacrosanct room, and nobody can be in there other than the 9 justices. If 9/11 happens again, a marshal timorously goes to the door and knocks, and the junior justice answers the door. So it's only the 9 of them. Now, there's a lot of so I've never, you can go in that room, but you cannot go in the room when the justices are there. But I've talked to them and others, and have the impression that it would seem like this august Olympian tribunal where they really think it through. It doesn't seem to be that way. It seems much more like they go around and vote. But that's how they would normally dispose of things. But then there's a separate stuff. This comes out most often in a death penalty case. Someone's going to be executed. It's an emergency motion. You've got to go to the chambers, and each individual justice, caucuses with his clerks and decides. And that's a process that they're used to and takes 36 hours. It's on the papers. And, I've actually, the very first one I ever participated in, there were 4 votes to grant cert, Marshall, Brennan, Stevens, and Blackman, but you couldn't get the 5th for a stay, somewhat analogous here. So what happened? They took the case and the prisoner was executed. So it got mooted out. I mean, talk about the rule of 5 versus the rule of 4. So the normal answer to your question is the sacrosanct conference room of the justices themselves. But for an emergency motion, and unless you're going to wait a whole nother week, and I don't see why they would do that, that's a different process of papers go to each justice. Each justice sends a memo that go to the other 8. And that's what I think happened here. And that just doesn't take 5 days. So that's why I think they've already decided. And what's happening now is someone is reacting to that decision, as is his right, by writing a separate opinion. But you can't hold the whole train up too long with something like that.
For those who watch the MeidasTouch Network, Legal AF, and the show, sometimes I analogize what we do to that of a meteorologist following storm patterns or hurricanes, and you can follow a weather pattern based on all of the data, but your predictive abilities can change based on certain circumstances. The weather doesn't always go in those directions. So when we try to make these predictions about what's happening, I just want everybody watching at home to know where these predictions come from, and that they're not what I think separates a show like the Talking Feds YouTube channel or MeidasTouch is that we try to find every single data point that exists and then make the best estimated predictions. And then to the extent you get it wrong, because everybody gets things wrong sometimes, try to understand where it was missed and what the outliers were and what the variables were that were not kind of predicted in that model. So what was cool about what we
on that, if I could, Ben, it's actually a brilliant analogy, because weather, as you add in factors, it gets complicated, and it reaches a point of complexity where we at a certain point you just can't even say anymore as you add on different nuances. So that's our choice as commentators. I agree, to be sort of simplistic about it, or to really try to get to the nuances, maybe give predictions, and hopefully they remember more when you get it right than when you blow it. So
well, hopefully justice prevails, and regardless of right or wrong.
There you have it. There you have it.
And
I'm hoping. Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Make sure everybody you subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. Harry and the team at Talking Feds, they're on their way to 250,000 subscribers, and they're growing quickly over there. So make sure you subscribe. They're partnered with the MeidasTouch Network. Check out all of Harry's videos. I think you'll really enjoy the commentary. They're complimentary of everything we do here at the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe here as well. Let's keep growing this pro-democracy community together. It's so important to get out the truth and actual data. See you next time, folks. Harry, always a pleasure.
Same to you. See you next time, everyone.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.